I've heard of people spending 200 to 300K to, again, build out. My startup costs was a grand total of 1,200. I did DIY all of it as in setting up the LLC, but it's really simple.
Welcome to another episode of the Physician Growth Accelerator, a show where we break down your medical practice systems into vitals, give you the tools to diagnose root cause of what may be restricting your growth, and prescribe what to do about it. I'm your host, Ed Williamson, and I believe that every system is perfectly designed to get the result it gets. There's freedom in that statement because we don't have to sit on the sidelines and just let the world happen to us. We can see that everything we're experiencing is a perfect outcome. And if we want something different, all we have to do is tweak the system. And I'm really excited today because we have a special guest, Dr. Mitra Sadhu. She's a physician, mom, speaker, blogger, change catalyst, and vocal champion for lean private practice. She's the founder of Link Medical Spaces and the writer on the Lean Private Practice Solutions blog. Mitra, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Zed. I'm thrilled. And by the way, I have to say, I love the introduction to your podcast. It rings so true.
I appreciate that. I think there are many, well, first of all, just foundationally, we believe that there is tremendous importance in private medical practices. I'm not fond of a world where private practice does not exist. And I also feel that there is a general belief that being in private practice is harder today than it was years ago. And that can be because someone is feeling a little bit of a squeeze between how much total revenue comes in and how much it costs to operate the practice. And so I'm really excited to talk to you because you have a whole philosophy and a whole structure around getting into private practice or running private practice at a way that some people may not even think is possible. And that's the idea of lean private practice. Can you maybe just start by giving us an idea of where that came from?
Sure thing. So I'm a nephrologist and I run a solo lean practice in Florida. I got here kind of by accident. When I first got out of training, I was doing some independent contractor gigs to stay flexible. And then in a few years, as the kids reached kindergarten age, I wanted to do a little more. At that point, I was exploring options and figured out that there are two basic choices I had. I found I could either work full-time, 100 hours a week, and down the line, I'd have a shot at partnership, which would give me the privilege of more 100-hour weeks, among other things. So that was the hours and not as a compliment, and get paid for that, albeit at a highly discounted offer for that privilege. So neither of these two really sat right with me. At that point, I realized I'd have to create my own solution, which means start my own practice. Now, I've always known I want to work part-time because I'm the primary parent for my children, and I want to give my best energy to both my patients as well as my kids. Now, how does one run a practice in this day and age and work part-time? So I knew I'd have to think outside the box. And that is when I decided to hone in on the two biggest expenses for private practice, namely office space and staff. And that is how my practice was born. I came across the word lean down the line, actually. I didn't know there was a term for what I was doing. But when I came across it, I was like, wait, this is what it sounds like, because I think I am providing all the value that I can for patients, even if I were in a fancy office with a bunch of staff hovering over me, that I am providing in my shared workspace location with only a remote virtual assistant to help me at this time. And I started, like I said, as a micro practice. So that's how it came to be.
That's great. It's, I love when we are presented with a situation that gets us to be a little creative, to create, to come up with a solution that is helping us achieve what we want to achieve. And what I want to call out, because there may be people listening right now that are in their mind thinking, I'm already running too lean. I already don't have enough people, or there's no way I could cut more costs than I've already cut. And so would you mind defining the concept of lean for the audience? Because I think right now it's possible that people may think it just means cutting costs.
I love that you bring this up. Yes. And that is not quite the case. The Lean Enterprise Institute defines lean as a way of thinking of providing perfect value with zero waste. Now, that's, of course, the North Star. We don't reach perfect value and zero waste, but the idea is to be laser focused on value and not so much on cost, and just try to minimize waste. The costs automatically come down when your processes are efficient and there are fewer bottlenecks and your patients and your staff are engaged and happy. The numbers automatically begin to make sense. But yes, the focus is it's about nearly obsessing in a good way about value to our patients. And value is always defined by the people you serve. In our case, our patients. So what do they find valuable? Naturally, top-notch medical care, but a few other things too. Maybe reaching a human on the phone, getting their first or initial appointment within a reasonable time frame, at the office, an easy check-in or check-out process, making payments, being seen by the physician in an unhurried fashion, getting their question answered between visits. So if we focus on how we can streamline each of the steps in each of the processes, you have yourself a lean practice.
Yeah. And the term you use that is really important, I think, for us to define is waste. And what happens is the way our brain is set up, it tends to grab a definition that you have associated with something and apply it without questioning the application. And waste doesn't necessarily mean materials. Waste can be time. Waste can be energy. Waste can be duplicative efforts where things are done over and over and over again. Am I off base with that kind of defining waste that way?
Nope, you're spot on. So the lean philosophy actually defines 8 kinds of waste. And if you hear them, they sound very much like they came from manufacturing, which they did, but you'd be surprised how they're hiding in plain sight in all of our healthcare settings. So for example, you mentioned loss of time. That can be because of duplicated processes and efforts. For example, if the practice management system is not synced with the EMR, then you're inputting the same information again and again. If you might be asking patients to fill out the same information in different forms at different times, though it can easily be copied from one place to another. There are wastes in what they call defects and we call errors in medicine, and we know that has such serious effects. There is wasted motion. If someone, say, uses the copy machine a bunch of times in the day, say the front desk, and the copy machine is in the office manager's room, they're going back and forth, trying to make copies. Or even the procedure room is here and the materials are stored in a storage closet down the hallway. Small things, but that add up multiple times every single day for weeks and years at a time and make a difference. So space is another big one. Wasted space is another huge one, whether it is unused space in a practice, whether it is a physician who has like 3 or 4 exam rooms allocated to them, but those then turn out to be only glorified waiting rooms because you can, I think I read it works out best if you have 2 rooms and you and your scribe are perfectly in sync and you keep exchanging rooms. So that's probably ideal, but these are some things to think about.
Yeah, it's fascinating because even what you mentioned about the copy machine. And so someone might say, okay, it's 20 feet away. How big of a deal is it for someone to walk an average of 3 miles an hour for 40 feet compared to if it's close to them? But that's not just the deal. It brings in other variables. It brings in new conversations. It brings in, a lack of focus for what the task is. And those things add up into waste. And I'm going to call out that I'm probably a little bit weird because I think about this stuff all the time. So for instance, I run lean when I get up and get ready in the morning. So I have one of those electric toothbrushes that runs for 2 minutes, and I have trained my ability to button my shirt with one hand, my left hand, and put on my pants and put on my socks while I'm brushing my teeth, because if I'm just brushing my teeth, I'm actually wasting time if I can be doing other things at the same time without any error or defects in what I'm doing. And it's amazing when you just think about where these little opportunities of efficiency exist. And when you don't think about them, they add up into a death by 1,000 cuts. And it's fascinating. So I love that you're taking this head on. I'm curious, when you had mentioned something about talking to a human and that being important to a patient. I found that there is a lot of companies out there creating solutions, and sometimes we create solutions for a problem, but it's a surface fix. It's almost like taking Tylenol for pain instead of, diagnosing a root cause. And we've seen that in our business with online appointment setting, where new patients, it doesn't work that well if you're measuring conversion, meaning how many people come to a place where they can book an appointment compared to how many they book appointment. But it's been really powerful with existing patients. And that's an example of paying attention to what is the desired outcome and what are we actually trying to solve. Are you seeing things like that in your practice and how people interact with you?
Absolutely. So, for example, I have a pretty low call volume, even accounting for my smaller patient volume. I work part-time. What I tried to do from the beginning is, if I found that patients call repeatedly, or different patients call for the same problem, I try to preempt those calls by trying to get that information to them before they have to call. So, for example, now when a new patient calls and schedules an appointment with us, when it's we send them a message on our secure messaging platform telling them the date and time of the appointment, so that we're not getting a call saying, hey, I forgot when the appointment is, and our address. And in fact, a little spiel, or just a little line about where the office is located. Because what happens, and I found this right from the beginning, is that the GPS brought them to the right plaza, but it's a big one. And for some reason, it doesn't pinpoint the exact building. So I have a line in there, we are located at such and such, and our office is on the second floor right above the Starbucks. For some reason, Starbucks is doing pretty well and everybody can see that. So put that line in there, and the call volume dramatically dropped, with patients lost in the parking lot asking frantically for directions because they're running late. So that was just one example. We subsequently instituted reminders for labs, reminders for visits. In fact, when we refer them to a physician, we also give them the office number and name, so that in case they're not getting a call as expected from the doctor referred, then they can call and say, hey, I have a referral, so little things like that.
Yeah, that's funny. It's so powerful that, no one on the planet knows where 4836 Veterans Boulevard is in any city, except the people who are in that building. But that's how we tell our customers to find us. But everyone knows the blue building next to Home Depot. And that's so powerful that you are making it easier for your patients, because they're going to the doctor. Typically, you're not like, oh, yes, this is the greatest day in the world, I get to go to the doctor. Right. So they're in a state of probably a little bit of stress. Right. They probably left later than they should have. And now they're driving and their GPS is saying they're in the right place, but they start telling themselves, I can't see it. Our brain is not good at lying to itself. So now it almost removes it from their vision because of that. And you've given them this simple tool to help just, remove, make it cognitively easy for them to get to your practice. So that's a perfect example of providing a solution. Now, you actually, so you've successfully operated a lean practice, but you've taken something to another level, and you are the founder of Link Medical Spaces. So can you give our audience an idea of what that is?
Absolutely. So this was, again, born of necessity. When I was first starting, I ideally wanted to sublease space from another established practice. I was starting without a footprint in town, without a patient panel following me, and I had no idea whether it was going to take off or not. And I wanted to start small. So I called a few practices around me to ask, and they seemed to have no idea. Or in general, it got nowhere. So the seed was planted at that time. It took me a couple of years to get it into action, but it's basically an online platform that connects physicians and other healthcare professionals to a medical office space that is available for lease or sublease. So it's different from any other commercial real estate listing site in two main ways. One is that it's specific for medical office space. And so you're not being a needle in a haystack with thousands of listings for all kinds of commercial space. And two, it's the only platform that allows you to sublease part of your office suite, because that was the original intent and purpose of the site. Though, of course, if somebody is, say, an investor and has an entire office suite available, then you can definitely lease the whole thing on there as a primary lease. But yes, so the hope is to help out the startup practices, keep a smaller footprint. It might be the difference between somebody actually having the courage to start a practice versus going into an employed position despite not really wanting to, only because of the monetary, the upfront cost. It might make the difference between not getting and needing to get a startup loan versus needing to get one despite student loans and all of it, or somebody who wants to work part-time or have a small volume, or even an established practice that wants to, say, set up a shop in another part of town, a satellite location, and they need only a little bit of space. It would work for all of those purposes. And on the other side, for practices that have any available space, 10 years back, 15 years back, we didn't need to think like this. There was enough to go around that if there are the last two rooms down the hallway are full of boxes, they can stay that way. You don't need to sweat it. But now, if you can turn that around and make it into a passive revenue stream, then that's excellent. It'll ease the burden on some other stuff and maybe not make you rush through the day, adding a couple of more patients, because again, that's another revenue stream. Also, you might be able to bring in a service that's of value to your patients. You're always wondering, where's a dietitian I can send somebody to, or a mental health professional would be great for my patients, or say a speech and language pathologist for a pediatric practice, or say a surgeon who's in the OR for 3 days a week and his office is lying fallow. That's perfect to let somebody else in there and utilize it. So those were all some of the scenarios that played in a role in me launching this.
Yeah, I love it. It's basically the definition of reducing waste, on every side, because there's also scenarios where there's an existing practice right now. And I'm a big proponent of understanding your financials. And unfortunately, that is not taught very well. And many times there are decisions like, you know what, we should add a location. And they go and they get a full building. They sign a long-term lease. And then it turns out that all they did was add cost to their organization because a new location wasn't needed. Imagine using this type of tool, you can learn very quickly how beneficial that new location is for your practice in a different part of town. Without a lot of risk. And then the idea that being able to remove waste of your existing office space is huge. Like you said, if there's rooms that are just not being used, that is waste. And sometimes people don't think of that as waste because it's like, well, I'd have it anyway, and we just don't use it. And, we kind of store things in there, but that is waste. And if you are obsessive about removing waste, that's a perfect opportunity. And I love your idea about bringing something in that is even, raises the value to your patients. So that's good. I like that a lot.
Thank you.
Going back to that person who is thinking about starting a new practice, there are many people that they likely don't even take the step because they're already assuming that it's not doable with the things like a big lease. Do you have an idea of what the difference in startup costs can be between someone starting, going all in, leasing a building, staffing up big time compared to using a tool like Link Medical Spaces?
So I don't have official data, but I'll tell you that I've heard of people spending 200 to 300K to, again, build out It's not just leasing, it's also building it out to your specifications, and then everything that entails. If you have a big office and a waiting room with a big front desk, well, you need to staff that front desk. In a setup like that, it becomes harder to cross-train one person to be front desk as well as, say, MA or something. Though that might be perfect in the beginning, because you might have like 3 patients trickling in the first month or so, or something, so it can be easily done. However, sometimes the setup itself hamstrings us. So that's that kind of number, 200 to 300K. My startup costs was a grand total of 1,200. I did DIY all of it as in the setting up the LLC stuff, but it's really simple. I think the narrative that all of this is hard has somehow been ingrained into us. And I suspect part of it was by folks who had to gain from that narrative. Compared to our day jobs, this part is not hard. Yes, there's a bit of uncertainty because it's not laid out so well in a nice textbook that the med school tells you to purchase. So yes, it's a little more uncertain stuff, but hard is not the word I'd use. So it's certainly doable. So yeah, the difference can be that much of a multiple.
I'm glad you brought that up. Going back to this fancy brain that we work with, one of the most common biases or heuristics that get in our way when we look at something like setting up an LLC is something called ambiguity effect. And ambiguity effect tells us that if something isn't clear, our brain is going to assume worst case scenario. And that's why people will go like, well, that's too hard. I don't know how to do that. And again, the brain doesn't like lying to itself. So it does just take, like, you are a physician. You have done much harder things to become a physician than anything it takes to do the work to get a practice started. And I think if people really wrap their heads around that can kind of, be aware of the ambiguity effect, that's what's holding you back. It's not actual risk. It's your brain telling you there's risk because our brain wants us to survive, and it doesn't know the difference between the paperwork for an LLC and a saber-toothed tiger from 200,000 years ago. So I think that's a really important point. Mitra, I really appreciate you taking the time today. This is powerful information. You've done something that many people probably didn't know was possible, or if they thought about it, didn't think it was possible. And that's always motivating when we can witness someone achieve something in a different way than maybe we thought the only way was. If someone's interested in medical office space for themselves, or they have extra space, what would you have them do? What's a good first step for them?
Great. So they can go on the site, Link Medical Spaces. It is really easy. It's just a few steps, kind of like listing your house on Zillow or something. You answer a few basic steps or questions and state what you're looking for. If you're looking for space, we do actually have a page for that, and say, hi, I'm, say, a pediatrician looking to start a direct practice in certain place, city of the country. It is set up to serve the entire country, so that shouldn't be a problem. And on the other side, if you have space, again, you create an account and put in some information, take some nice pictures, and in a matter of minutes, your space is up there for listing. It's a small monthly fee, no percentage commissions or no commissions that last the length of the lease. I was pretty flabbergasted when I heard that's how commercial leases work. So it should be easy to recoup. And for any other information, I'm really easy to reach. I'm on Facebook more than I should be. I'm on LinkedIn, so I'm happy to answer any questions that may arise. I would like to point out that, yes, we are in medicine, so be careful with the lease agreement. First of all, if you are leasing, make sure you're allowed to sublease, and that should be in your original lease agreement. And number two, make sure you structure the sublease in such a way that you're not running afoul of any anti-kickback statutes, star clause. It should be commercially reasonable. You should be charging fair market value for everything that you're providing, the space, the amenities, the utilities, and all of it, and prorated accordingly. And all of this is easily doable. I've written some posts on this. If it helps, I'm happy to answer questions.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great call out. So linkmedicalspaces.com. We'll put that link in the show notes, and we'll also put a link to your LinkedIn and Facebook in the show notes as well. If someone goes to that website right now and they're interested in an area, let's say it's Austin, Texas, and they don't see anything available right now, does that mean that they should give up on Link Medical Spaces, or should they do something additional?
I would not give up this soon. You can check back and see, we have new listings constantly. Also, if you are looking for space, I'd recommend you put it in there in the request page. That is free of cost. And that should motivate somebody who's sitting on some space to maybe, list it. And that's how connections are formed.
That's great. So if you go to any of our listeners, go to the website and you don't see an available space listed today, submit your information so that it nudges people in that area to call out, oh yeah, you know what? I do have, 1,200 square feet or 800, whatever. And that's really good. Mitra, thank you so much for joining us today. I think this is super valuable information. I love what you're doing with private practice. Like I said, foundationally, I believe in the importance of private practice, and the tools you're creating are helping people not only survive, but thrive in a world where other people are thinking it's getting a little too hard. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate this opportunity. It was fun talking to you.
Absolutely. And if you're listening to this podcast, I'm going to assume that you're dealing with some kind of constraint in your medical practice, obstacles in the way of achieving your goals. That can look or feel like maybe burnout, hitting a plateau, employee drama, costs going up, revenue going down, and more. And you probably want to make a change. If that's you, you can go to physiciangrowthaccelerator.com and check your vitals using our free diagnostic. It helps you identify maybe what is the biggest thing in your way today. physiciangrowthaccelerator.com. And we'll see you next time on the Physician Growth Accelerator.